welcome to this deep dive into the historical sources. If you look at a stained glass window of Emperor St. Henry II, you see a halo and hands folded in pure prayer,
Yeah, you see this serene face, but what you definitely do not see in that glowing glass is the medieval warlord who literally kidnapped an archbishop.
Right, to steal the crown jewels. Today, we're on a mission to unpack a total masterclass in medieval spin.
We really are. We are looking at a huge stack of sources today.
Yeah, we have the Bamberg Catholic Pilgrimage Guide, biographies from My Catholic Life, and then these incredibly dense historical analyses.
Like the Cult of the Chaste Imperial couple, plus some profiles from EBSCO history.
Exactly. And we are figuring out how extreme political ruthlessness and intense personal piety somehow got woven together.
Right, to create the only canonized German monarch in history. It is the absolute definition of historical muddy waters.
It totally is. So let us start with the human being behind the halo. Section 1, the human origins and initial friction. What was his official name at birth?
So he was born in May of 973 in Abbot, Bavaria, and he was baptized simply as Henry.
Okay, just Henry. But he had a pretty famous epithet later on, right?
He did. I mean, obviously he became Saint Henry, but during his lifetime, he carried a very specific Latin cognomen, or nickname, which was Claudus.
Which translates to the lame, right?
Exactly, the lame. And we will explore the physical realities and the spiritual mythology of that limp a bit later.
Okay, I am intrigued. But first, what was his family background and socioeconomic status?
Right, so he was high nobility. He was born into the Ottonian Dynasty, and for context, they were the absolute superpower of Central Europe at the time.
Like the Holy Roman Emperors, basically.
Yeah, the successors to Charlemagne. But his immediate branch of the family tree was incredibly precarious. His dad was Duke Henry II of Bavaria.
Oh, also known in the historical record as Henry the Quarrelsome, which is just a phenomenal nickname.
It really is, and a nickname he fully earned. He spent his career repeatedly, violently rebelling against his own cousin, Emperor Otto II.
So an unsaintly youth for our young Henry, growing up with that kind of role model.
Well, because of this constant treason, the emperor eventually stripped Henry's father of his duchy, threw him into exile, and that actually meant young Henry was completely sidelined.
Right, because if your dad is the exiled family traitor, your prospects in secular politics are basically zero.
They were actively dismantled. The emperor explicitly ordered that young Henry be sent away to Hildesheim and Regensburg to be raised by clerics.
Just to neutralize him.
Exactly. He was mentored by Bishop Abraham and Bishop Wolfgang, who actually became Saint Wolfgang later on. He was trained specifically for the priesthood to keep him out of secular power.
That feels like a classic spare heir situation. Or just neutralizing a rival bloodline, since a priest can't marry and produce heirs for a future rebellion.
That was the exact strategy.
But I have to ask, was Henry genuinely this pious, scholarly kid? Or was he just biding his time, playing the holy hand he was dealt, while secretly harboring his dad's ambitious DNA?
You know, the evidence points to a profound immersion in the church. He genuinely received an elite ecclesiastical education.
So he wasn't just faking it.
No, I mean, he learned to read and debate in Latin, he studied deep theology, and he was profoundly shaped by monastic ideals. He absorbed that cleric worldview.
But a monastic education doesn't put a crown on your head. Which brings us to the catalyst and breaking point.
Right, he needed a crisis to break out of that clerical box, and he got one in the form of a very cryptic dream.
Oh, I love a cryptic historical dream. What happened?
According to the hagiographies, the official text promoting his sainthood, Henry had a vivid prophetic vision of his old mentor, Saint Wolfgang.
The guy who raised him.
Yeah, and Wolfgang had recently passed away. In the dream, Wolfgang pointed to a wall where two simple words were written, which were, "after 6."
After 6? That is so vague. How did he interpret that?
Well, Henry interpreted this to mean his own death was imminent. He thought he had 6 days, or maybe 6 months, or at most 6 years to live.
Wow, so he panicked.
Basically. The sources say he went into overdrive preparing his soul for the afterlife. Fasting, praying, just getting his spiritual house in order.
But spoiler alert, he doesn't die.
He doesn't. 6 years pass, and in January of 1002, exactly 6 years after that dream, it was actually his 21-year-old cousin, Emperor Otto III, who suddenly died.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he died of a severe fever down in Italy, and crucially, he left absolutely no heir.
The throne is empty. And this is the dramatic break from society, right? The
Yeah.
pious scholar vanishes and the ruthless opportunist steps in.
Exactly. Because what happens next is wild. As Emperor Otto's funeral procession is physically moving through Bavaria, bringing his body back north, Henry intercepts it.
At a place called Poling, right?
Yes, at Poling.
Yeah.
And he doesn't just pay his respects. He walks right up to Archbishop Heribert of Cologne and straight up demands the imperial regalia.
The crown jewels, specifically the Holy Lance, which was the ultimate symbol of Ottonian imperial authority.
Right. Possession of the lance meant the right to rule. But the archbishop obviously says no.
So what does Henry do? Does he pray about it?
No, he literally takes Archbishop Heribert and the archbishop's brother prisoner. He locks them up to secure the regalia.
Wait, he goes from intensely preparing his soul for heaven to kidnapping a high-ranking bishop on the side of the road.
He really does.
That is completely wild. That is way less humble servant of God and a lot more Game of Thrones.
Totally. I mean, Henry knew his legal claim was incredibly weak. He was from the disgraced Bavarian branch, and the other nobles despised him.
So he just bypasses the traditional nobility vote entirely.
Exactly. After taking the regalia by force, he intimidated the Archbishop of Mainz into crowning him King of Germany.
And he didn't even do it in Aachen, the traditional sacred coronation site.
Nope, he did it in Mainz on his own terms, basically saying, I have the lance, I have the crown, deal with it.
Which leads perfectly into his radical mission and the church friction that followed. Because you can't just steal a crown and expect everyone to be cool with it.
Right. Half the nobility hated him. So he needed a narrative that made his rule divinely mandated. His core focus, his unique charism, became a policy called Renovatio Regni Francorum.
The restoration of the Frankish kingdom.
Exactly. He set out to intertwine church and state so tightly that resisting the king became equivalent to resisting God.
But how does that actually work on the ground? If secular dukes are rebelling, how do you hold an empire together with theology?
You use the prince-bishop loophole. It's a brilliant piece of medieval statecraft. If you give land to a secular duke, he passes to his son, and they build a rival dynasty.
Oh, right. But a bishop takes a vow of celibacy.
Precisely. A bishop cannot have legitimate heirs. When a prince-bishop dies, all that land and military power instantly reverts back to the king.
So he just appoints a new, loyal bishop. He built his power base by heavily empowering clerics who were entirely dependent on him.
That was the strategy. But to make it work, he needed absolute discipline within the church.
Yeah, you can't have corrupt priests trying to pass church lands to illegitimate children.
Which is why he became a massive champion of the Cluny monastic reforms. They demanded a strict return to the rule of St. Benedict and rigid clerical celibacy.
So he aggressively enforced these reforms to replace rebellious abbots with loyal reformers. And his impact and legacy really stem from this.
Well, absolutely. He even wanted to be a monk himself. There's a famous story where he goes to the abbot of Verdun to take monastic vows and give up the crown.
Wait, really? He actually tried to quit.
He did, but the abbot accepts his vows and then immediately uses Henry's new vow of obedience to order him to continue ruling as emperor for the good of the realm.
That is a perfect encapsulation of his internal conflict, craving the cloister but chained to the throne.
And defending that throne required immense violence. We have to talk about the enemies and the friction. He fought a grueling 16-year war against Duke Boleslaw I of Poland.
And a 16-year medieval war is just brutal. Endless muddy sieges,
Yeah.
starving out cities, disease.
Right. It was so destructive that later Jacobite apocalyptic traditions literally depicted Emperor Henry as one of the heads of the apocalyptic dragon.
Wow. So to his enemies, he wasn't a saint at all. He was a monster bringing about the end of days.
Exactly. And amidst all this chaos, we arrive at the most debated aspect of his life, his marriage to Empress Cunigunde of Luxembourg.
Right, because according to the sources, they lived in a chaste marriage, meaning perpetual virginity, never consummating their union.
The hagiographies present this as the ultimate spiritual sacrifice, giving up earthly pleasures to dedicate their empire to God.
I have to push back on this with a modern lens, though, because if a medieval king cannot produce an heir, it invites rebellion.
Oh, for sure. It looks incredibly weak.
So is it possible this chaste marriage was just a brilliant medieval PR spin? Like if you're dealing with infertility or impotence, you rebrand that biological failure as ultimate spiritual purity.
You are tapping into a skepticism that existed even back then. A 15th century historian named Thomas Ebbendorfer explicitly ridiculed Henry for this.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, he wrote that the whole chaste marriage narrative was just a convenient cover for Henry's physical impotence.
Which shows the PR spin wasn't universally accepted.
Exactly. But whether it was a spin or a genuine spiritual vow, the result was they had no children. The Ottonian dynasty was destined to die with him.
So to cement this image of a holy ruler, despite having no heir, they really leaned into the mystical and the surreally supernatural.
They absolutely had to, especially regarding his physical flaws. We mentioned his nickname, the Lame. He walked with a severe limp.
And what caused that?
Well, historical chronicles like the Annales Paladenses record a gritty reality. During a military campaign in Italy around 1004, he was briefly taken captive.
Okay.
And while making a desperate escape, he severely tore the ligaments in his thigh.
A battle injury while running away. Not a great look for a warrior king.
Exactly. So the guys writing his saintly biography came up with a totally different narrative for these mystical phenomena.
What did they claim?
They claimed that while on pilgrimage to Monte Gargano in Italy, he had a mystical experience. He witnessed a heavenly mass where God and the angels were physically present.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah, and during this mass, the archangel Michael touched Henry's thigh, causing permanent lameness as proof of spiritual contact with the divine.
Okay, they just ripped off the book of Genesis. That is literally the story of Jacob wrestling the angel, and the angel touches his hip, so he walks with a limp.
Right. It is incredible spin doctoring. Ignore the torn ligament from a botched escape. Behold the divine touch of the archangel.
They totally mirrored the biblical story on purpose to place him in the lineage of patriarchs.
Oh, without a doubt. And this supernatural shield extended to Cunigunde, too, with her own lifetime miracles.
Right, because there were political rumors questioning her fidelity, which could have unseated her.
Exactly. So the legend says she demanded a trial by fire, and she miraculously walked barefoot and completely unharmed across glowing red-hot plowshares to prove her innocence.
Just casually walking on red-hot metal. Incredible. Did Henry have any personal healing miracles while he was alive?
He did. He suffered from a chronic, agonizing stone illness, likely kidney or bladder stones.
Ouch.
Yeah, and the legends claim he experienced a miraculous pain-free cure through the direct intercession of St. Benedict while visiting the Monte Cassino Abbey.
But despite all these claimed miracles, we eventually reach Section 5, death, canonization, and the mystery of the relics.
Right, because PR can't stop a failing physical body. In July of 1024, at 51 years old, Henry falls severely ill.
Where exactly did this happen? The transitus, this is final moments.
His traveling royal court was staying at the Palatinate of Groan.
And Palatinate is basically a temporary royal palace, right? Since kings traveled constantly.
Correct. It was an estate near modern-day Göttingen. He succumbed to a chronic, incredibly painful urinary infection, likely related to that stone illness.
And what were his final actions?
The hagiographies note that Cunigunde was at his bedside. Having no heir, he physically passed the imperial regalia into her hands.
So the moment he dies, the Ottonian dynasty dies in that room.
Exactly. The German nobles eventually elected a new dynasty, the Salians.
But Henry's spiritual career was just getting started. What was his canonization timeline like?
It was incredibly fast for a monarch. Pope Eugene III formally declared him a saint in 1146, about 120 years after his death.
And Cunigunde followed later.
Yeah, she was canonized in 1200 by Pope Innocent III. They remain the only imperial couple in history to both be canonized.
Okay, I have to ask the cynical question here about that canonization. During his reign, Henry basically created the Diocese of Bamberg out of thin air, right?
He did, yeah.
He poured immense wealth, land, and power into this diocese, making it subordinate only to the Pope. Did he essentially buy his sainthood with real estate?
It is a totally fair critique. Historians debate it constantly. The clergy of Bamberg were the absolute engine behind his canonization.
Like a lobbying group.
Pretty much. They compiled the dossiers, verified the miracles, and aggressively petitioned the Pope. Henry made Bamberg rich in life, and Bamberg made Henry a saint in death.
A perfectly symbiotic relationship.
Right, but to be fair, his personal piety genuinely seems to have been profound. He read theology, he prayed fervently, he believed his brutality served a divine purpose.
So what is the fate of his body and his relics today?
He is buried in Bamberg Cathedral. His remains lie inside a breathtaking, late Gothic marble tomb carved by Tilman Riemenschneider.
And the tomb itself tells his story, doesn't it?
It does. The sides are intricately carved with the legends we discussed, like Cunigunde on the hot plowshares and Henry being cured by St. Benedict.
And there's still actual relics people visit.
Yes, pilgrims still press their hands against the worn marble of his tomb seeking intercession. And a local convent even claims to hold a piece of his mantle and his personal cross.
It is a testament to the power of a well-crafted legacy. We've talked about his wars, his kidnapped bishops, his chaste marriage, and this whole miraculous PR machine.
That's a lot to take in.
It really is. But for you listening, as you evaluate Emperor St. Henry II, his most tragic legacy actually isn't a massive cathedral or a marble tomb.
What would you say it is?
His biggest impact on the world was actually a single word. In the year 1014, when Henry traveled to Rome to be crowned emperor by Pope Benedict VIII, he noticed something missing from the local liturgy.
Oh, the creed.
Exactly. Up in Germany, thanks to his clerical education, it had become customary to recite the Nicene Creed with a slight addition. The word was filioque.
Latin for and the Son.
Right. The original creed stated the Holy Spirit proceeded from the Father, full stop. The German version said it proceeded from the Father and the Son.
And the Eastern Church in Constantinople vehemently rejected this.
Completely. They believed a pope making a unilateral change was an illegal, massive power grab. But Henry used his immense political weight to pressure Pope Benedict to officially add it in Rome.
And the Pope caved because he owed his physical safety to Henry's military protection.
Exactly. Henry got his way. But just 30 years after Henry's death, in 1054, that exact theological addition became one of the primary catalysts for the Great Schism.
The permanent bitter split between the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches.
Yes, the emperor who dedicated his entire life and wealth to strengthening and uniting the Catholic Church ended up personally planting the seed that permanently fractured global Christianity in half.
That is a massive historical irony.
It really is. Think back to that stained glass window we talked about. The plain, simple image of a saint in pure light. The more closely you look at the sources, the more you realize the glass is built out of jagged, contradictory fragments. Piety and violence, kidnapped bishops and divine devotion. Keep questioning the glass.